Hello, this is the Jay Show, and this is Dr. Jay Smith, who is here in London, in England. I'm with my good friend Hatun Tash, and we're now really getting into the meat of the material. Now let's look at this slide that we looked at the very beginning when we looked at all the variants. If we could bring that slide up, it shows all the many different variants on the right, the different readings. If you could unpack the 5 different cities real quickly, just to remind the viewers of what we're talking about.
So we are talking about the first Quran, what Uthman did after he compiled the perfect Quran. He compiled the Quran and then he sent it to Mecca, Medina, Damascus, Kufa and Basra with people who knew how to recite this Quran well.
So now, he sent it to more cities than that. We know there are 9 complete, but these are the ones that we have access today, and these are the ones where we see the variants today. That's why we're pinpointing these cities.
So, and then we are looking at the Qurans which has been sent to these cities. And then in Mecca, we've got Ibn Kathir's Quran, who had 2 students. In Medina, we've got Nafi's Quran, who had 2 students. In Damascus, we've got Ibn Amir, who had 2 students. And in Kufa, we've got 3 teachers, Hamza, Al-Qasai, Abu Bakr Asim, and they have altogether 6 students. And then in Basra, we've got Abu Amir Ibn Ala, and then he's got 2 students.
And so one of those students has 2 different variations himself.
Yes. So we looked at what are the Arabic Qurans those students wrote it down or recited, and what are the variations with these Qurans.
And just those 5 cities, we found 24 different Qurans.
Yes.
24 variant Arabic Qurans. If you look at those cloud forms, those brownish cloud forms, each one of those cloud forms are numbers, and in those numbers show how many variants per student. And you can see they're not just a few, they're not even tens, they're not even hundreds, these are thousands. In one case, up to 5,000 difference from the Quran that we have today, from this Quran right here. This one that I use all the time at Speaker's Corner. This is the one I take everywhere with me. This book is the canonized form. These are variants from this book. And they look at the dates. These are 8th and 9th century variants.
The Quran you are holding is the canonized Quran 1924 Hafs Quran, which comes to us from Kufa. And on the graph you are seeing all the brown colors with the numbers, brown cloud with numbers, are the numbers shows how many differences that Quran has with the Hafs Quran.
And what we're saying that these differences are all right there.
Turn other way.
Make sure I get it the right side up. Look at the differences all right there. Every time you see a red mark, every time you see a red letter or word.
That's not for the older Qurans, but you can have access to the Qurans, which it gives you color code that you can work out and make your job easier.
So they're not trying to hide this. They're right open about this.
Yes.
These variants do exist, and we have thousands of variants if we add them all up together. On the left side, these are cities that are not as important. These are weaker ones. They're not as authoritative as the ones on the right. The 24 on the right, the 13 on the left, that's about 37 right there. So 37 different Qurans, variants all the way through it. And now what we're doing is saying, let's see how important these variants are. Because we're talking about of what you have done so far. You've been able to come up with 43,000 of them. Now, that's way too many for us to look at. So we're just going to look at a few of them. In the last episode, we went up to Surah 2, Ayah 58. And we're going to look at the Hafs and the Warsh. We've said this before. We want to look at these 2 to begin with, because these are the 2 major renditions, you might say. And it's the Hafs on the left that we're going to have in blue, and the Warsh on the right that we're going to have in gold. So let's take a look at the Hafs and the Warsh. We've already done Surah 1, Ayah 4. We've already done Surah 2, Ayah 10. And now we've done Surah 2, Ayah 58. We're now starting with Surah 2, that means Book 2, Ayah 125. There it is up on your screen now. Let's look at it.
So Surah Baqarah, verse 125.
Let's have our Arabic speaker then read the differences between the Hafs and the Warsh.
حفص اتخذوا ورش اتخذوا.
Okay, so Hafs, and if you look at it very carefully, let's enlarge the print itself. We want people to look at this. Now, I know that most of the people that are watching do not read Arabic. We can read Arabic, but we're not Arabic experts. That's why we have an Arabic expert here who's a native speaker. But if you take a look at just look at the text, you can see the differences just by looking at the text. When you look at the hafs on the left-hand side in blue, we have put the line underneath it. Atak igzu. Can you see between the ka, there is a kasra, a line underneath. That's called a kasra. That's the E sound. On the right-hand side, you will see it is it's a fatha. So atakazu. Can you see one's a fatha and the other one's a kasra? So the hafs has an I sound, the kasra. The warsh has an sound, the fatha.
So that's just like small sound.
Seems like a different.
Yes.
So what?
So what? Does it make any difference? Does it change anything?
Let's look at the translation.
Okay.
And let's see what it does to the translation.
Okay.
You read the hafs and I'll read the warsh.
Okay. Surah 2 verse 125. In Hafs version of the Arabic Quran, it is translated as, and when we made the house of place of restore of mankind and a place for safety, and take you the place of Abraham as a place of prayer.
In the Warsh it says, and when we made the house a place of resort for mankind and a place for safety, and they took or have taken from the place of Ibrahim as a place of prayer.
So when I read the Hafs, it is telling me, take you.
It's now, do it now. So it's present continuous.
Yes.
When I read it in the Warsh, it has already been taken. So this has already happened. So just by changing a kasra and a fatha, one case it's an E sound, one case it's an A sound. Let's ask our Arabic speaker, why is that changed so much?
I just want to point out that it's the same drawing, same dots, just the tashkil, the shaping, the short vowel, that changed the kha from kasra to fatha, changed the meaning from an imperative to a past tense.
Thank you.
So, can you see? Important that those of us who are not native Arabic speakers, we would not have picked this up. But an Arab speaker sees the significance immediately.
Yeah, and just emphasizing something. This is not the main Warsh Quran. This is the Warsh Al-Basani Quran.
So it's one derivation of the Warsh
Yes.
Quran. So here you have one that is imperative, present, and that becomes in a past tense, have already happened.
Yeah.
Now, let's continue. Let's move into the next slide. And here you have Surah 2, Ayah 140. Let's have our Arab speaker go ahead and give us the two words that are there.
Hafs taquluna, warsh yaquluna.
Okay, now this is symptomatic of many of these. There are many of these differences between you say and they say, or he says and say. Kalu or kul.
Yeah.
There's so many of these all the way through the Quran. So we're just giving one example of that. On the Hafs side, it's takuluna. If you can see, if you look carefully, you can see the ta with the fatha above it. When you look on the Warsh side, you can see the two dots are not above the letter, they're below the letter. And that's yakazula. Yakuluna. So there you have a yaw that has been brought in instead of ata. Now you might say, so what? So the two dots are above, the two dots are below. But as a native speaker have said, our reader, it's very clear that does change the meaning. So let's see how it changes the meaning.
I'll read the Hafs and you read the Warsh. Surah Baqarah verse 140. Or do you say that Abraham, Jacob, and his offsprings were Jews or Christians? Do you know better, or does Allah?
All right, and the Warsh says, or do they say that Abraham, Jacob, and his offspring were Jews or Christians? Do you know better, or does Allah? Let's move on then to Surah 2, Ayah 184. Now, here is, again, we're still in the same Surah Baqarah, and we have the Hafs in the Warsh. And let's have our Arab speaker go ahead and give us the Arabic for both these two renditions.
Hafs miskin, warsh masakin.
So miskinin versus masakina. Now let's unpack it looking at the Arabic. If you look at it very carefully, you can see that there is a kasra under the meme over here, and on the Warsh side it is a fatha above the meme. And then you can see the scene, it has another fatha. In fact, if you look carefully, it has a dagger aleph following it. So it's a long A sound. Masakina. And it ends with a fatha at the end on the warsh side. On the hafs side, there is no fatha there. It is a sukun, so it's mis, and then kinin. So it ends with a kasra at the end as well. So you can see immediately that that changes completely from one poor person on the hafs side to many poor men.
Hafs Quran is talking about for your redemption. If you are having difficulties regarding your fasting, for your redemption you need to feed one poor person.
One person, man.
It has to be one person, and it has to be poor person. When we look at the warsh one, what does it say?
It says many. It's plural. So you have a lot more to feed.
I guess the question will come, for my redemption, do I feed only one person, or I need to feed more than one person?
I would go with the hafs if I was trying to be a miser, but obviously maybe the warsh is the one we have to do. So you could lose your redemption if you only feed one. If you only had the warsh to go on and you get to heaven, God says, I'm sorry, where are all the ones you're supposed to have fed? You've got the wrong translation. You've got the wrong book. You should have gone to the warsh. It says many you're to feed.
Yeah.
It's obvious now that this does change the theology and could change someone's redemption. That's hugely significant.
You shouldn't play with your eternity. So when we look at overall in Surah 2 verse 184, so we are talking about the tashkils again. If our Arabic speaker just unpacks what is
it's a letter missing. Harf.
Oh, harf is missing. A letter is missing.
Okay, where is that letter that's missing?
It's the alif.
The aleph, daga aleph in the warsh is added on. It's missing in the hafs. So if you look where the scene is, the daga aleph is there. It has been added. People will say, well, this has been added at a later date. Nonetheless, it's been added by man. And there's the daga aleph there right above the scene, and it's not there with the hafs side.
Yeah.
It's a sukun. It stops the sound. It doesn't have an double So here you have a huge difference. Just by adding the dagar aleph, you change the meaning, you change the theology, and you change people's redemption.
Yeah.
Let's now go on to Surah 2, Ayah 219. So we're still in Surah 2, we're still in Surah Baqarah, and we get to the hafs in the warsh again. So we'll have our Arab speaker to go through the two different words.
Hafs, kabirun. Warsh, kathirun.
Now this one's interesting, Hatun, because here, if you look, you really do have two completely different letters.
Yeah.
Let's enlarge the two now, and if you look at the hafs, can you see there's a bean? So it is a dot below the line, which makes it a ba sound with a kasra underneath, means it b.
Yeah.
On the warsh side, there is no dot below the line. There are three dots above the letter, which makes it a th sound. And the kasra is still there. So it's kabirun versus kathirun. Completely different letter. So they might say, okay, so it's a different letter. That doesn't change the meaning. That doesn't change the context. Sounds close. Kabirun, kathirun, kabirun, kathirun. What's the difference? You know, you say potato, I say potato. You say tomato, I say tomato. It's all the same, right?
Okay.
It isn't the same. Take a look and see how this changes the meaning. So let's look at the translation.
Okay,
you do the hafs, and then I'll do the warsh.
Okay. In Surah Baqarah 219, in Arabic translation would read as, they ask you about wine and gambling. Say, in them is a great sin and benefit for men.
So, a great sin in the hafs case. When you go to kathirun, it says, they ask you about wine and gambling. Say, in them is plenty of sin, benefit for people.
So it doesn't look like there is that much big difference between great and plenty.
You're drinking wine, it's a great sin. You're drinking wine, it's plenty of sin. It has to do with quantity. Is it a big sin or is it a lots of sins?
Is sin countable or not countable? I guess that's the question.
There you go. Is it something which is big or something which is much?
Yeah.
And there you can see it's a matter of quantity, it's a matter of size. It's also a matter of greatness. In this case, it is a great sin. It is a huge sin. Rather, it's just plenty of sins.
Of course, the question will come, what kind of sin can Allah forgive? What kind of sin Allah cannot forgive?
Well, is it a great sin he can't forget, or is it just many sins he can't, many small sins? So there is a huge confusion here, and you can have a huge debate, theological debate, just because one letter, 3 dots above one line or 1 dot below the line.
It changed the consonant
Huge
letter.
It makes a big difference. Now, what I want to do is I want to go and move away from Surah 2 to another surah that actually has much the same problem. I'm going to jump to Surah 33, Ayah 68. It's very well known. So let's have our Arab speaker read the 2 words there between the Hafs and the Warsh.
حفص كبيرة ورش كثيرة.
So when we enlarge the Arabic, if you look at the print there, can you see under the B, the ba, you have a dot, and a kasra. But when you look at the other word in the warsh, it's 3 dots above, which is the tha, and the kasra at the bottom. So one is ba, and the other is tha. Now, seemingly nothing incidental like the previous one.
Sound is same.
It sounds the same, but let's look at the translation. How does this change the translation?
Okay, I'll read the Hafs. Surah 33, verse 68, read as, Our Lord, give them double punishment and curse them with a great curse.
So, in the Warsh it says, Our Lord, give them double the punishment and curse them with many curses. So, are they to curse them with one great curse or many, 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 many curses?
So, is
That's
it
confusing.
once for all or small, lots of times?
Huge difference. You can see why this would confuse an awful lot of people. Do we just get cursed once or do we get cursed many times? Hugely amazing. I would like to know. I would like to just have one and not many that come after that. But you can see then.
So you want it to be done once and then you
That's it. I don't want to be cursed over and over and over and over again. I will go with the Hafs in this case. That's what I would like to choose. But see, it's not up to me to choose. God's supposed to be very clear. The Quran's supposed to be very clear. I thought there was only one way to understand it. And yet here I cannot find out which is the one I can understand. Human intervention has confused me. And that's why Warsh and Hafs do not agree. Let's move on. So now we've looked at both Surah 2, Ayah 219, and Surah 33, Ayah 68, that say must have a difference between the Kabira and Kathira.
Yeah.
Now let's take a look at Surah 2. We're still in Surah 2 now. Surah 2, Ayah 251. Let's go ahead and get the reading from our Arab speaker.
حفص دفع ورش دفاع.
Okay, now this is interesting because you can even hear the difference there. It's quite different when you look at it. And let's take a look at the Arabic as we compare the two side by side. So you have the da with a fatha above it on the Hafs. You have the da with a kasra below it on the in the Warsh. On the Hafs, you have the fa with a sukun above it, which stops the sound, whereas in the Warsh you have a fim with a fatha above it, which gives it, but more than that, it doesn't even have a fatha. It also has a dagger aleph again. There's that dagger aleph suddenly appearing. Can you see that? That dagger aleph that's like a little line going up and down, that is the dagger aleph that elongates the as sound, makes it twice as long, which then you can see will change the meaning completely from the Hafs to the Warsh. So much so that let's read the translation between these two.
Just before we read the translation, as you look at the pictures, you will see number of the verses are different when we compare the Hafs and Warsh Quran. It is because the way verses are counted is different from one Quran to other Quran. Just don't think we are looking at the wrong verses. So mainly Warsh Quran is one verse behind the Hafs Quran. In Hafs, if it is Surah 2 verse 251, that will be in the Warsh Surah 2 verse 250.
Okay, are you all following that? And it's a good thing you brought this in at this stage, because if they're going to look up to see if we're doing it correctly, they say, oh, you've got the wrong verse.
Yeah, because as we will see in the future Qurans, even some Qurans it's placed with 4 verses. So it's 4 verses in front or 4 verses behind of the main Hafs Quran.
Ooh, okay, that's a huge problem. But
so just just wanted to point that out here as you look at the
okay, and we should have said this at the very beginning before we got into this. Nonetheless, now we're here. We have a fatha on the Hafs. We have a kasra in the Warsh. We also have a fatha that's just a normal fatha after the da. In the in the Warsh, we not only have a fatha, we have a dagger aleph, which elongates it, which completely changes the translation. So let's read the translation. You do the Hafs, I'll do the Warsh.
Okay. Surah 2, verse 251. And were it not for Allah's repelling some men with others, the earth would certainly be in a state of disorder. But Allah is gracious to the creatures.
So Allah repels in this case when you get to the Warsh, and were it not for Allah's defending some men with others, the earth would certainly be in a state of disorder, but Allah is gracious to the creatures. So it's a completely different word.
Okay, you might think it's completely different, but as someone who is English is second language, for me, there is a difference between repelling and defending, only 2 letters. Does it change the meaning, Jay?
Absolutely. Defending. When you're defending or when you're repelling, Allah is repelling. It's an action where you're pushing out. You're pushing him against. So that's an action that goes that direction. You repel some men.
So in Hafs, Allah is repelling some man.
That's very offensive.
Allah is pushing.
It's an offensive action.
Yeah.
Defending is a defensive action. It's just the opposite. So defending, especially if you have the repelling or defending, it's 2 different directions. One goes this direction, you're repelling men, and the other, I'm not going to hit you. I'll be very careful not to repel you. But you will, if you start to hit me back, I'll defend. Can you see? It really is 2 different ways and really 2 different directions of action.
So we've got extra daga elif in the word. Sound is different and word itself is different. Of course, that affects the meaning of the verse.
Meaning the verse.
In Surah 2, verse 251, is Allah's repelling, is Allah's defending?
I'd like to know. That would make a huge difference, because you can see that it confuses the reader as to know which is one. And why did Warsh change it? We don't know. The fact that he did change it. Or
why did Hafs change it?
Why did Hafs? Because Hafs was writing in the 9th century too.
Yeah, we will never know what was the original.
Sad, isn't it fascinating how that there's an us. And let's move on now. We're still in Surah 2, and we want to go on to Surah 2, Ayah 271. So let's have our Arab speaker go ahead and read what we have in Hafs and Warsh.
Hafs, yukaffiru, Warsh, nukaffir.
So it's between a you and a nu. You and a nu, you and a nu. Well, that's completely different letters, isn't it? One has 2 dots below the line. That makes it a you. The other one has 1 dot above the line, makes it a nu. They both have a dhamma, but you can see the dot is quite different. Can you see the 2 dots for you kafaru below the line, and on the one side, the 1 dot above it?
Yep.
That changes the meaning completely. It changes the tense.
Yeah.
Let's look at the translation and see how it does change it. You go ahead and read the Hafs, then I'll read the
So
Warsh.
Surah 2, verse 271 in Hafs translation, it reads as, and he will expiate from you. Expiate from you some of your misdeeds.
So he will expiate from you. In my translation of Warsh, and we will expiate from you some of your misdeeds. Now hold on a minute. Who is doing the expiating here? Him or us?
Or is Allah speaking as a plural
so
sense?
So is he singular or is Allah plural? If it is Allah.
Yeah.
And I would suggest this probably is Allah in both cases, is it not?
Yeah, from the context, yes. It is Allah speaking.
And this is a question we have always asked about the Quran. The Quran has lots of references to Allah in the plural form.
The question is, why would Allah use plural form for himself?
Unless he is plural,
it is his
if Allah
eternal
is
word.
one. And you can see why this has theological implications. I would suggest most Muslims would like to go with the Hafs, whereas those of us who have been asking this question would probably say the Warsh needs to be looked at, because I don't mean to be a devil's advocate here, but there is a problem here theologically speaking. I would like to know if we, meaning God in the plural tense, expiate my sins, or you, meaning you, or he, just God himself as a singular expiates my sins.
If you remember the certain Islamic traditions, we see Quran is arguing with Allah for behalf of people who recite the Quran. So, in this context, it might be Allah as Allah and his eternal word of Allah. In a Hafs, it might be Allah by itself without his eternal word.
That's correct.
You see the theological.
That is theologically hugely significant because that seems to suggest that the Bible is correct and we've got it correct all the way along. I don't want to say the Quran is supporting that. It looks like the Muslims need to deal with this themselves.
Yeah.
And they need to ask themselves and have debate internally. Some people might even say, does we have to do with humans? That is in there. You could probably come up with it, but in the context, it looks like it is God, plural, is the one that expiates our sins. Okay, let's ask our Arab speaker here what they come up with when they read this.
The question here, what I see is, in Hafs, he. So someone is talking about God, that he will expiate sins. But in Warsh, God is talking about himself.
Well, that's a good point. Thank you. So really what we're saying is someone is looking from a distance.
Speech of Allah.
Is it coming from the Quran saying this of Allah, or is it God himself speaking within the Quran?
Yeah.
Good point. So there's another theological problem right here.
Is Allah involved with the conversation, or Allah is talking about other people?
So depending on where you put that dot, folks, you're going to have a real theological debate. And this debate's going to go on and on and on. And we're going to see this problem over and over again. Now, what we're going to do, we've gone through Surah 2. We're going to stop with Surah 2 for this episode, episode 10. And the next time we start with episode 11, we're going to go then to Surah 3. But let's just review a little bit of what we've gone through, Hatun. It's been great to finally get to the surahs and to get to the ayahs and to look at the verses and to unpack the verses and to show the people on the screen, people who are watching. And I hope you are looking at this, and I hope you're not just listening to us, you're actually looking at these verses. We're not making any of this up. These are pictures we have taken, you have taken, of the actual text by text by text, putting the next together to make it as easy as possible, so even those who don't speak Arabic, those of you who have never read Arabic before, you can see that these dots are either below the line, they're above the line. You can see the fatha, which is the a sound, the kasra, which is the e sound, the little turlicue, the dhamma, which is the u sound. These are sometimes missing, sometimes they're there. And have you noticed that also the dagar aleph, that little line that goes up and down, that elongates the fatha sound. It makes it a double ah. These are been added, or sometimes they're missing. And when they are missing and when they're added and when the dots are above and below line, they change not only the way you say the word, the way that the word is then translated, and that then changes the theology. We've just looked at Surah 2. We're going to be looking at other surahs and seeing even worse changes as we go on from episode. Go and help us, and what does this mean?
I think it will be helpful to remember. Claim is, today's Quran we are reading is exactly the same. What was revealed to Muhammad, not even a dot changed. Yet, just looking at a couple of verses, we see dot has been changed, edited, taken away, and it does change the meaning of the word. It does change the theology. It does affect eternity of Muslims.
There you go. It affects the eternity of Muslims.
Yep.
We've already looked at how you get redeemed. Is it by giving alms
Feeding
to one man or
yeah.
many men? So hugely significant. Listen, we're going to be doing this some more. Don't leave. Come back. We're going to continue to unpack these verses. We're going to do not only from Surah 3, we're going to continue right up until Surah 98. So stay with us. We'll see you next time in episode number 11. This is Jay here in London with Hatun. Over and out.